Okay, so webinar recording is online, and I'm now starting the webinar. You're going to go live to everyone in a minute. Okay. So I believe the webinar has started. Sandeep sir, if you're still there, can you just confirm the webinar has started and no longer in practice?
Yes.
Okay,
We are
great.
live now.
Okay, great. So Deshna and Manan, I think you can take over from here. I'll be there like on standby, just like if a technical issue happens. Okay. For now, let's begin without further ado. All right, guys.
Hi everyone, sorry for the technical glitch. My father always says that make mistakes soon, and so I'm happy that we did it in the second session and not the 10th session that we'll be having. So yeah, I'm Deshna. I am a YF Fellow 2021. Currently, I am working as a senior analyst at Clinton Health Access Initiative, working for the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. I have Manan with me, who would be my co-host. So Manan, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Deshna. Hi, everyone. I'm Manan. I am a fellow from the 23 batch, and currently I'm working at Quality Council of India and happy to moderate the session for you all. Thank you.
So the objective of the event is to leverage the Ashoka community to answer some of the key questions that arise as we go through our grad school applications, the selections, etc. And we have our panelists here who have gone through the entire process and are studying or have already studied in some of the dream schools that we aim at going. So now we'll be covering questions here to why an MPP or an MPA or some other degrees which are related to the sector, how to choose your schools, the geography, evaluating your profile, understanding the finances, and everything else that you guys might want to know. So let's start. I would request the panelist to, as we ask questions, if they have to add something, if you could please use the raise hand functions. And all the other participants who are as panelists right now, please, we'll request you to not interrupt or unmute yourself during the session. Please message us if there are any questions. Manan, please go ahead. We'll have a short introduction.
Sure. To start us off, yes. Yes. So I'll start by introducing Kohima. Kohima is currently working with Central Square Foundation under the government partnerships team while supporting the central government on national education strategy and program implementation. She has 6 years of experience in collaborating with various state governments or national initiatives. She holds a master's degree from Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy at NUS, Singapore, and has a postgraduate diploma in liberal arts from Ashoka University and a bachelor's in engineering. Followed by that, we have Ritvika, who is currently pursuing her master's in international development policy program at Georgetown University. She has previously worked in the finance sector as well as the development space, with the latest stint being at GDI Partners as a senior associate consultant. Her prior education background includes a BCom degree from Mumbai University and the YF at Ashoka University. Then we have Daksh, who is currently in his second year at Harvard Kennedy School. He's pursuing his master's in public policy. He has previously worked with UNDP in India while deploying socioeconomic surveys and conducting research. He completed his undergraduate degree in economics and finance in 2019, and he also minored in computer science during his ASP. He's still exploring future employment opportunities, but wants to work in the field of development and social protection.
Next we have
Deshna,
Shifali. Next we have Shifali. Shifali is completing her MPP and Sciences Po Paris with a concentration in technology. She has been awarded the Charpak AME scholarship by the French government to pursue her studies. Before this, she did her bachelor's from LSR, followed by YF at Ashoka. Then we have Ashna, who has also been tremendously helpful in helping us organize this session. So thank you so much. She's a second year student at the University of Georgia, doing Masters of Public Administration. And wonderfully so, she's on a full scholarship by her department to pursue her MPA degree. Prior to this, she worked at Sattva Consulting for 3 years towards designing and implementing programs in livelihoods, healthcare, and digital and financial inclusion for corporates, in partnerships with governments and NGOs as well. She has completed her undergrad in economics from SRCC, DU, followed by the YF at Ashoka. Next, we have Bhargavi, who was generous enough to join us at the last moment. She's an alum from the Harris School of Public Policy, the University of Chicago. She has received a 50% scholarship before joining the MPP course. She pursued her YF and a bachelor's in economics. She was also a co-founder of Sangh, a non-profit youth collective started by the Young India Fellows during the pandemic to support marginalized populations with food and ration. Bhargavi, during her time at Harris, completed a STEM certification, interned with organizations including World Bank, United Nations, behavior science team, and including some other professors like Anjali Adukia, and is now working with a non-profit in Chicago, just called the Heartland Alliance. Thank you so much, Bhargavi, for joining us, and all others as well. After the long introductions, let's start with the questions. So, Manan, would you like to start, or okay, let me start. Cool. So the first very important question is why MPP? The most basic questions that people have in their mind is what motivated you to pursue an MPP? How does it differ from an MBA, or why an MPA, or why any other course, right? What are the differences? So yeah, let's start with that. Anyone who would like to pitch in and answer this question? Guys, please. Daksh, why don't you start?
Sure, it's good to be here. Thanks for inviting me. Question of why MPP versus an MBA is a little bit skewed. I think the closest degree to an MPP is the econ, master's in econ degree. That's traditionally been there in the field. My reasons for pursuing an MPP and not the traditional econ degree were twofold. First is MPP, I see MPP as applied econ. It has a broader range of employment opportunities after you graduate. And the traditional econ degree, my perspective on this is that it's made to design professors, and I don't want to be a professor. So the MPP degree for me is the middle path, so to say, between doing a traditional econ degree and doing nothing at all. So I think that's the major difference that I see between an MPP and a master's in econ or development policy or anything else. It's more applied, greater job opportunities after that, and it gives you the flexibility to explore more social and economic problems rather than focusing on a very narrow set of problems that is done in traditional econ degrees. So that would be my 2 cents on that question.
Got it. Anyone else who would like to pitch in? Perhaps also more about how the degree is designed, what are the things that are taught, and how it's very different than perhaps an MBA, because that has been a question which has been asked by a lot of other participants. And how would it help you, and how did you end up selecting it?
I can take that question. Ashna, do you want to go ahead? Or okay.
Go ahead.
Because I started when I was pursuing the MPP degree, or like when I even started applying, I think I was very at the beginning stage of my career. So one thing that, and I think this is a question that we can answer even during the later sessions when choice of colleges come in and choice of universities come in. But I think the MPP program is very different in different universities. And so how it'll be designed. So I can speak for U Chicago, say, for example, it is very quant and data heavy, and it's very, very research focused. However, if you go to a UC Berkeley or a Harvard, and I mean, Daksh can speak more about it, their programs are designed in a more different way where you have more, say, leadership focus or more quote unquote policy focus. And so I think, so I think there's a lot of variety within MPP also. So while making the choice of which university you want to pursue, I think that is a good idea to look at different curriculums and what are their, say, outcomes that are coming out of what are people doing after pursuing a particular MPP course.
Another question that has come in are that there are other courses like a Master's in International Development, which Ritika has also pursued, so perhaps she can answer. And courses in sustainability, which perhaps a lot of MBA colleges are offering right now. So a lot of courses other than an MPP and an MPA which people pursue. So what are the reasons that people do that?
Thanks, first of all. So, for me specifically, I wanted to pursue curriculum in international development because I didn't want to stay back in the United States necessarily. And I always knew that my focus was for lower income countries. So it could be something which is probably not India, not necessarily India, but I wanted to focus or work in countries which are lower income. And hence, international development curriculum made more sense than a public policy course, which would be where the curriculum itself would be very US policy focused and would help me get jobs in the US for sure, but that wasn't where I was looking to go. Secondly, a lot of the international development policy courses are STEM designated. So that was also a good way that I was looking at it as, like, in case I want to stay back for a few years and work here and then head somewhere, that is also a good way to look at it. So yeah,
Thanks for
I
that.
hope that answers the question. If not, let me know if you want to follow up to that.
We don't have any follow-ups right now, but yes, thank you
Okay.
so much.
Yeah.
Just the last question in this category is, what is the difference between an MPP and an MPA? And anyone who would like to answer? And why did you end up choosing it?
I can add to it, and maybe someone else can also add based on their experience. So thank you for the question, and thank you for having us here today. Specifically speaking from Recon News angle, MPP for me was 2 years when I had to make a choice, and MPA was 1 year. So the way MPA and MPP is designed in the context of Recon News is that MPA is mainly targeted for bureaucrats, people who are coming from the services. It could be from any service, any country. And MPP was heavily designed for people who come from non-service background, for people like me who were working and wanted to study policy. And also the other difference is MPA was 1 year, MPP was 2 years. So I think, and the terminology might vary. So I think Ashna or Shifali or someone else can add to it who have a different terminology back in their universities. In Singapore, MPA is 1 year and MPP is 2 years. The course is also, the content of the course is also, to say, a bit different. MPP, as Bhargavi and Daksh were saying, that it's more research driven, more data driven and econ driven. MPA is, because it's mainly done by bureaucrats, it's towards leadership. So that's the basic difference that I understood. But yeah, please feel free to add.
Got it. Thank you so much. Anyone who would like to add anything? Otherwise, we'll move towards the next section.
I can quickly add to that because I'm doing an MPA degree, but I agree with what Kohima said. I mean, the terminologies quite differ from even university to university, but at least from what I have experienced as a part of my MPA program is that it's more application based, like it's more somewhere at the intersection of an MBA and an MPP, because you do a lot of policy courses, but at the same time, you do a lot of courses such as program evaluation, courses such as budgeting, finance, etc. So it's a lot to do with what you can do in an MBA as well, with doing what you do in an MPP, in a core MPA program as well. So I've taken a lot of courses on econometrics, on policy, the econ part of it, but a lot of courses which will help me sort of in my jobs, like practical courses that can help you like in jobs that you might get in an MBA as well. So MPA is sort of more administrative, like the name suggests, rather than being very heavily policy focused. But again, it can depend from every university, because I know, like when I was applying to the US, I know there were universities that had MPP courses also, which had very practical courses, whereas an MPA courses that were very heavily focused on policy. But just to draw like a basic distinction between the two, at least between an MP and an MPP, you can look at MPA as being also more application based, having more generic courses along with policy courses, and an MPP with having more of, which is more like policy and econ focused.
Thank you so much, Ashna. And actually, your answer brings us to the next topic, which is about choosing schools and identifying the relevant programs for oneself. So Manan, why don't you take it over?
Sure. Thank you, Deshna. Thank you for the responses as well. And the responses also highlight why we wanted to cover this section, because since you all mentioned about the relevance of data science coming in into public policy, or having STEM or non-STEM MPP or MPA degrees coming in. So while choosing different schools or identifying various programs to apply for, we wanted to understand what are the various factors that you kept in mind while identifying those schools, and how we can prepare a list of those factors and how to actually rank those factors amongst themselves as well.
I can go in for that one. So for me, it started with looking at the different geographies I would like to study in. And because I was sure I wanted to do a 2-year program and not a 1-year program. So a lot of the European programs got eliminated in that manner. Subsequently, I went to look at the STEM designations that the programs might have. While it was a good factor, it wasn't necessary that they have it. But if a program, had a STEM factor that was a STEM designation, that was definitely a pro. And subsequently, I also looked at the employment outcomes, or where the alums are working. What are the, because I have a rough sense of the areas I might want to work in. So I was looking at the organizations or, who hire from the university, to get a sense of whether there might be alums who could connect, or things like that. So that was how I went about it mostly. If there's anything else that comes up, then I'll let you guys know.
Ali, do you want to add?
Sorry?
I said Shefali because Shefali was also trying to
Yeah.
speak, so I mentioned
Okay.
Shefali.
Okay.
Do you?
Audible?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you can be a little louder, please.
Okay. Like, I think for me, how I think this would answer a lot of questions, is that I'm doing tech policy right now, and how I approached it was that I didn't necessarily seek out policy programs, but I was seeking out technology plus society programs. And this tech policy program fit right into what I was seeking. And so I think that's another way you could go about it, because there are schools which offer concentrations and specializations within the sphere of policy. And for me, technology was the non-negotiable, and I found that at Sionspo. At least from a European perspective, I think Sionspo has a lot of number of specialist programs like these. Like we have one in, I think, politics, and I think we have one in economics. So if you want to do even more econ than what policy usually has. I think that's another consideration. But for me personally, apart from tech plus society, there was funding, there was living expenses, and there was other opportunities of staying back, visa, etc., that I think are important considerations.
Thank you, Ritvika and Shefali. Now, just a follow-up question on that. Both of you talked about STEM versus non-STEM. What do you think is the importance of a STEM versus, or why choose a STEM program, or why not choose a STEM program? Anyone who wants to take up? And Bhargavi, because you received a STEM certification. So why do you think that matters a lot, specifically in US? Also, for other geographies as well, please feel free to add up to it.
Yeah, I do not know about other geography, especially because my admission process, I think, was way back in 2019, but I can talk about more like from like a postgraduate kind of a perspective. I think so when I entered Harris, that was the year when it changed its MPP, like certain certifications from STEM to non-STEM. So, and you have some schools including, Georgetown, as Ritvika mentioned, and then you have CEPA, which is Columbia. They have some MPP courses which are STEM. The advantage of that one is that you basically get, so it's all from a perspective of a work visa. And so generally you get 1 year of work visa after your graduation. However, with a STEM degree, you have 2 more years of extension that you get over on top of that. So if you want more experience in the US and if you want to stay back, or a lot of people go into the H-1B process and it does not always work out in the first round. So it's a good way to have that leverage and have that 2 more years on your hand. One distinction, that's something that I only got to know once I came here, because probably I was naive and like not researching as much as I should have, was specifically to UChicago. There's an MS-CAP program, which is very, very focused on STEM, or like it's a very computer science driven course. So if you do have plans as to, or you do envision yourself staying back in the US, I would definitely look at the difference between STEM eligible versus STEM qualified courses. So what STEM eligible does is that, yes, you could have an eligibility to get that extension, whereas a STEM qualified gives you the guarantee that no, you will definitely get it to your 2-year extension. The other place I could suggest, especially if you have a computer science focus, is CMU, which is Carnegie Mellon University, which also provides a blend of data science / STEM / policy courses. Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm just going to add one more thing. I think what STEM does is it's giving you, especially because we're in that world of AI and technology and like using a lot of data science, getting those basic skills. And I was coming from a non-engineering background. So for example, of course, I had econ background, but even if you do not have a very quant heavy background, at least at UChicago, you go through a track where even with basic skills, you can develop these data science skills and statistics skills and econometrics, which makes you a better prospect in the job market, so as to say.
Anyone else who would like to add for different geographies?
I can only speak about Europe or Western Europe. But I think my degree was also, while it's very quant focused, and we do have a lot of data science courses and a lot of econ courses, but I know that a lot of my classmates have no background in any of these skills. So there are a lot of opportunities for you to develop those. And I think a lot of the part of your degree would be in the form of electives or in the form of optional courses. So you could always take up those courses to hone your skills more over the course of your 2 years.
Sure. Thank you so much, Shefali. Now we can move to the next session, next aspect of the panel, which was about profile evaluations. And since we have a question coming in on GRE versus GMAT or the requirements for standardized testing, we can start with that and we can discuss the importance of GRE and GMAT in the application, and then we can build further on that.
Guys, anyone? Yeah, Daksh. Guys, please, we don't want to waste time like waiting for people to speak. So just raise your hand and just speak up. Yeah, Daksh, please go ahead.
Okay, on the question of GRE, so the pandemic made a lot of changes to the application procedures for a lot of these schools, and recent Supreme Court cases in the US have also changed a lot of affirmative action around that. So that's going to impact how immigrants from outside are going to get admissions. So GRE is not your complete evaluation. Let me say that's off the hook. I mean, nobody is going to say that if you have a GRE score above this, you are in. If you have a lower score, you are out. This I haven't seen any school do this ever, and I've been on admission panels for some of them. So it's just one component, and I think how they use it, how institutions use it, is to gauge whether you have the necessary quant and language skills to understand what they're going to teach in the future. And that's my view on GRE. It's not a criteria for your selection alone. It might add to your profile. If you have a good GRE score, do report it. A lot of the schools, what they did when I was applying like 2 years ago, is that they made the GRE optional. I think this was a question in the chat also. They made it optional, but instead they required you to submit a document saying what all quantitative heavy courses you have taken over your undergraduate or your subsequent graduate studies. So I did both. I gave my GRE, I submitted that score. It was a decent score. It was not way above the clouds. But I also submitted a list of courses that I taken, and this is the good thing about Econ at Ashoka, is that they gave me the power to say that I've taken a lot of quant courses because we did that coursework. So that's how I see GRE as a whole. It won't decide whether you get in or not, but it will certainly help your chances of getting in if you see it from a comparative perspective, student versus student.
Just to add on to that, especially if you don't have a quant-focused undergrad, then taking a GRE or a GMAT would be useful, because then you're showcasing that you have the ability to handle numbers at least a rudimentary level, which can be built up upon in your coursework. So yeah, especially if you have say English background or history or pol science or something, then definitely take it. Yeah.
Got it. Thank
I'll
you so
also
much.
add just one point again from a quote unquote job market perspective. A lot of jobs probably will also ask you for, not a lot of them, but like some of them, in especially like if you're applying for like management consulting or even social impact consulting internationally, including organizations like Dalberg, sometimes do ask for GRE and GMAT scores, and that can be a top up on your application.
Right, got it. Thank you so much, Daksh, Bhargavi, and Ritika. Thank you. So let's move ahead with the second subset. Sorry, the third one, which is profile evaluation. So the first question that comes in is how to build your profile. What do you think is an ideal profile, and how do you review your profile to understand your chances in different schools, and how to understand the gaps in order to build your profile accordingly? Let's start with perhaps Ashna or Kohima.
Sure, I can take this. So I would say there's no ideal profile, so to speak, because when I was applying to schools, I had the same question with respect to what should be what should be on my resume, what should not be on my resume. Because every day you see people getting into schools and you're like, oh, this person has this and this person has that. Should I have the same thing? To give an example, when I was in Satwa, I was working in the corporate advisory team where I was working solely with corporates for a very long time, of course in partnerships with like governments and NGOs, but they were my main clients. And when I used to see people from core development backgrounds getting into these programs, I used to feel whether I'll be sort of an ideal fit for this, because I don't have a background working with, say, governments or NGOs. And likewise, with respect to GPAs, etc., you might feel that, oh, your GPA is low or above like a certain average and your GRE. So there's no ideal application, I would say. I think it's very holistic in nature. So if there's an area of improvement in your application for one thing, you can definitely make up for it by showcasing another thing. Say, for example, if your GPA is low, there is always an optional essay that you can write to tell the admissions committee why your GPA was low, or why there were like some things in a certain semester. So for me, say in my undergrad, in a certain semester my GPA was low, and then in my say especially for CPA, they tell you to write an optional essay in case you want to mention anything. So I did write that I was in extracurriculars, I used to swim competitively, I used to do XYZ, which is why I was doing all of this, which is why my GPA was low, and I think that helped. So if you can make up through other things to sort of cover up for certain things, that's completely fine. I think what the admissions committee really looks for is a perfect like blend of everything. It has to be academics, it has to be extracurriculars, it has to be your SOP plays like a major role in your application. I think three things that are like the major things in the application is your SOP, your statement of purpose, why you want to go to the university, your resume, which literally is literally a brief sort of history of whatever you've done, and your LORs. And all three of them are very complementary to each other, but I feel the statement of purpose should really shine through and it should come through. And it's all about being honest. They don't look for like perfect candidates who've done everything in their life, but they look for candidates who are really passionate about what they want to do. And honestly, the admissions committee at this point in time reads like thousands of SOPs in a day, so they can literally see who's genuine and who's honest and who's not. And that's what they like also is what I feel. So I think for the application process and for your personal evaluation, I think SOP is one thing that you should start working on super soon, as soon as you can. And you should really reflect on that, because I remember I put in a lot of time for my SOPs for all the schools that I applied to. And I think that really helped, because it's more of reflection. It's more of just getting to know more about yourself in itself. So I think that should be there. And in addition to that, having a decent GPA, having some extracurriculars, and having some quantitative background depending on what course you want to do, either through a GRE or through a quant CV, I think always helps.
Right. Kohima, please go ahead.
Yeah. No, I think Ashna has really covered almost every aspect of it. I'll just quickly add two more things that I think it really made a difference to my application. And I think this is something that I've also told a lot of my incoming friends who are applying. I think in terms of application, see, one thing is that you sometimes what we do is if you're working in some Indian state or some part of India, I think we end up focusing too much on that in our SOP or in our resume also, which might not be too relevant to someone who's reading your SOP but not from India or doesn't understand the context of India that well. So I think one thing that needs to be taken care of is that you have to look at your SOP from the lens of an international person who's not too aware about India but broadly understands the context of India. So I think that is important, and also bringing in, if you're talking about climate change in India, say for example, and that is something that you're talking about is close to your heart and you want to solve and you're passionate about that problem, there is some element of it that you have to bring from your perspective, and not that something can be Googled easily online. So there has to be some solution to it that you are involved in. It could be at any scale. It could be even at your community level or even at your small block or a district level. It's not necessary that you have to talk about at a global or a national level. It's just that your application should stand out in that aspect. So I think that is one. And yeah, I mean, that's how it makes your application unique. Whatever you write should not be easily available online, or someone that else could also write about the same thing. So yeah, those two things.
Right. So I'll just quickly go ahead with the next question. So while we understand that no application is perfect, right, and nothing perhaps defines if you would get into a college or not, most of our participants want an objective answer to, what is good or what is bad, because there are certain biases in everyone's mind, right? That, hey, I have a low GPA. Anyone can tell them that, hey, it's okay, you can try, but they want some objective answer, right? Which perhaps one of them was given by Ashna, that, hey, you can write another essay to compensate for that, or you can just do some courses to compensate for that. So similarly, we have other bottlenecks which they have highlighted. One of them is college branding. Second is work experience. Work experience is how should you evaluate your work experience? If I'm a fresher, am I eligible? Should I work for two to 3 years more? And the third one being just highlighted on the chat, if I have work experience in other fields apart from policy, how can I take it to my advantage, right? These are the three things which are highlighted. So yeah, anyone who would like to please answer it, and perhaps as our participant said, a more objective way of putting it so that they know where they stand. Yes, Shefali, please. And next
Okay,
is
sure. So, I think just adding on to what the others were saying before for the question before this, one more thing that I think is important is what you're bringing to the table in a classroom, and I think that's something that when I came here, I was speaking that some people here from the admin also told me that we want a class composition which covers all areas, so that the discussions in class are fruitful for everyone, right? So. And I think that's really interesting because I come from a humanities background, and a lot of other people come from a management background or econ, or there were a lot of engineers in class also. So I think that is important to understand, to know that your background doesn't, like, whatever you've done is helpful for the class. And if you highlight that, especially as if you show yourself as an expert in that one area, I think that really helps the person reading your applications decide if you're adding a new angle onto the class. So I don't think anything, if somebody is a general profile, I would almost argue that they would not like that, because they don't want, in a 30-person class, they don't want 25 people to have the same thing and then to go on and do the same thing. They want a wide variety of things, and on their website they want to list different sectors. They want more names. So I think that's one thing. There's one more question about I'm sorry, what was the second?
Yeah, so it was about work experience, fresher, 1 or 2 years, if it's different than work experience in the policy space, as well as the college branding.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't come from any full-time work experience, and there are people in, again, my class who come from almost 10 years of work ex. I think it's I would say that it's okay to highlight whatever you have right now in your CV and bring out the best in it. And again, it would be about the admission committee wanting a certain sort of class composition. So again, it would be very specific to a certain school. I think personally, I think my CV would have been somebody who's a generalist, but who would add a humanities sort of angle to discussions. And I would also say it's and with like a South Asia angle. So yeah, that's, I think, as specific as I can get.
Jessica, please.
I just wanted to, so that covered most of what I wanted to say, but I just wanted to add, there are certain schools which specify that they want people with 1 year or 2 years, that is the minimum eligibility criteria. So when you're shortlisting schools, those are some of the key areas that you should look at. Whether the school itself has a elimination as such, because you wouldn't want to put in work for a school which won't, which will reject you right at the outset.
So basically, you're trying to say that one could go to the website and see the requirements, and we would find them there.
Yeah.
Okay.
If there is a minimum criteria, if not, then you should go ahead and apply anyway. Because for example, I have batchmates who have 7-8 years of work ex. I also have freshers in my class because my course didn't have a minimum requirement as such. It was taken off last year, but till last year they had a 2-year requirement of work ex. So yeah.
So unless and until written, it's okay to just be a fresher and apply. And do you think is it also a good idea to sort of talk to people who have been in the university and ask them, hey, what is the preferred work ex which might be required? Or
that is always a good idea.
Okay, got it. Okay. Next is Bhargavi.
Yeah, so I got into Harris when I had no work experience. So I had just done my undergrad and then I did the YF. So the only experiences I had were like internships, etc., etc. So yeah, please go ahead. And I have a lot of batchmates who I had a lot of batchmates and even juniors, etc., who are coming as freshers. However, this is where I bring the second point, is that you will face a lot of competition during internships, during jobs. So be mindful of that. So I would get, like, throughout these 2 years, I've gotten to the last rounds for a lot of job opportunities, internship opportunities, but competing with people who, and not getting the role because I was competing with people with 7 to 10 years of experience. So that's one thing to know. And also because MPP and MBA and or even MPA courses are very professional degrees, I do think thinking about why you want to do them is a very good idea, because going into those courses as a fresher, you might not have very specific things that you want to do, but it's more like world is your oyster, which can again depend on what you want to do. So it can be a good thing, it can be a bad thing. So just because I've gone through that process, so just making sure that these were my afterthoughts. Hey, did I really have to do this right after my undergrad? So yeah.
Right. Just one more thing, and after that, Daksh can take over. Was the one question I asked, and which was in the chat. if you have work ex apart from policy and development, right? Perhaps in a corporate or somewhere else. I'm not sure what the participant was trying to say. But how do you perhaps either cover it up or perhaps use it as your advantage? Any of you who has had the same experience?
Okay, I don't have any corporate experience. So, anyways, my three broad points on these two questions are: one, your entire application process, your entire application in its entirety. I'm not talking about a GRE score or a SOP or some other thing. The entirety is you selling yourself to an institution. Look at it this way. See it from the institutional perspective. They are looking not for specific people. They are looking for a diverse range of people within the same cohort. Okay. So when you see it from this perspective, you will eventually come to identify what are your strengths and what do you want to project. Your application is your projection, right? In your head, you have your entire 25, 26 years down the line, you know every detail there. They don't. You have to sell the best bits of yourself to them. And that's what your application should consist of more broadly. You have to think about it. This is a very actively reflective process. So I like to call it creative destruction. It's like you write down everything that you've done ever, and then you start destroying it completely. You start to find pain points. This can be destroyed, this can be destroyed, this can be destroyed, and you build up again on that. This is a way I think this has been useful to me when I'm thinking of writing applications. That's point number one. The second is on WorkX and minimum requirements. I agree with the panelists. Some schools say outright that we want this amount of experience, this amount of that. Some don't. But almost every school that you'll go to will have some public statistics on their website saying what the class composition was, how it has evolved over the years. So if you see that, it's a broad indication of what they're looking for. Even if they don't say it outright, that they're not looking for 2 years or 3 years of work experience, and if you see that the average class that they have in the past 5 years has had 3 years of experience, you should understand that your chances as a fresher are not as high as the other person who has those 3 years of experience. This is like subtle messaging that they do because they can't say it outright in their websites. And the third point, I think, which is heavily undermined in this entire thing is luck. Luck plays a very important role because the people that you're competing with differ from year to year. I have 2 years of experience. I got in. First of all, I don't know why I got in. This is something that you have to be very careful of. Nobody in this panel, nobody ever knows why they got in or why they didn't get in, because this information is never publicly released to students, right? Luck, as I was saying, plays an important role because you are competing with different cohorts over time. So it might be the case that in the time that you are applying, there was not another profile as good as yours to come in. In other cases, you might not be so lucky, right? So it depends. It really depends. Luck is a very big factor that you have no control of. So don't fret too much about this. It's just sell the best bits of yourselves to them. If you want to be vulnerable, that's great as well. But sell it in a way that they can understand and they can appreciate. So that would be the 3 points that I would say on those 2 questions.
Right. And one question which came in was how work experience before joining a school could be beneficial for you during perhaps internships or placements. So perhaps someone like Ritvika, I know, has worked at GDI, or someone else who has gone through the process could tell us how that is. And perhaps how you should choose your work before going to a school if you know you want to go to one after 2 years, so that it can benefit you during your internship or after school placements, right? And then Kohima, if you want to answer this, please go ahead. Otherwise, as well, please.
Yeah, no, I think on the point of WorkX, I just wanted to add that I mean, in terms of WorkX, your classroom learning experience also makes a lot of difference. I have seen that personally in my batch and with my classmates, that people who had certain amount of WorkX, the way they the way they engaged in the classroom discussions was very different. Their understanding of a lot of things was far different than someone who was coming from, say, lesser WorkX, or maybe just right after their graduation, because they would have not worked and hence they don't really sometimes understand. That doesn't mean that, you know, that that's going to affect your application, but it's just your entire learning experience might vary from someone who's coming with, say, certain number of WorkX. And I think, as Daksh was mentioning, that a lot of these colleges, and I think this is also true when we apply for jobs afterwards, that they say they end up using the word desirable. So which is a bit, you know, it's misleading. They wouldn't directly say that it is mandatory, or they wouldn't say that, you know, this is what we want. So they would say that 2 to 4 years of work ex is desirable. So that desirable is a bit of a loose word used, and you could take it to your advantage, frankly speaking. If you have that amount of work ex, go ahead and apply. You have a good chance at it. If you don't, I think there's still no harm at giving it a shot, because you would still write your SOP, you would still do a lot of crunching with your resume and your LORs. So it would still give you a good amount of experience getting through all of these documents in place. So yeah.
Got it. Thank you so much, Poema. Just if one person could answer the question that I had asked, and then we can just quickly go ahead to the SOP and LOR section.
Could you just repeat that, please?
Yeah, the question was that how that if choosing work ex before school, if you if you know you have to go to a school after 2 years, right, or some X years, how would that help you once you go to the school in your internships or your placements? Yeah, that was the question. Or perhaps how should you strategically do that or choose that?
Yeah, I mean, I think from the whole WorkX idea, what we were talking about was that there is no particular correct, WorkX that would fit in for the school that you're looking at. So I think you should look at roles that fit into your idea of what you want to do, and then use it in your LORs, irrespective of whatever the role was. I think that's a better way to do about it. You can't reverse engineer it. But if anybody has a different opinion, please feel free.
Okay, yeah, sure, Daksh.
Reverse engineering, so I did the reverse engineering.
Okay.
My framework for this is, let's assume you want to be here in 5 years time, and currently you are here, right? This is reverse engineering at its best, I think. And you want to cover this distance, right? If you're pretty sure that this is where you are and this is where you want to be, you have a pretty good idea of what's going to come in between and what's going to help you. So this is what I say to a lot of people who come with these questions, is try and figure out first where you want to be in the next 5 years, 10 years. This can be a vague idea of which organization, which person, which sector, anything. But if you see this gap and you can identify what steps there are in between, which can help you build this bridge, then that's where you are for. It's all about intentions, right? I know that only an MPP cannot help me do this, but an MPP plus X plus Y can help me get to that level. So once you start, applying this kind of framework, having where you want to go in mind, I think that helps a little bit in clarifying what you want to do, what you need to do, what you should have been doing in the past. So those kinds of questions start clearing up a little bit.
Thank you for that energetic answer, Daksh. So we'll now move ahead with the next section regarding the SOPs and LORs. Manan, why don't you go ahead?
Sure. Thank you, Deshna. So whenever we start applying, the first thing or the second thing after standardized tests that comes into our mind is SOPs and LORs. And if you can see the chat as well, there have been a lot of questions on LORs relating to who to reach out to, or what if I am 3 or 4 years into the workforce, I am not in touch with my professors. So we'll get to that as well. We can first start with discussing the importance of SOPs. Like everyone has mentioned how important the SOPs are. So can you all please throw some light on how to go about writing SOPs? Like Daksh mentioned that you can be vulnerable if you want to, but is being vulnerable the right option, or how to present, or how to try to present your best foot forward in your SOPs?
I can go ahead on that. So at least, I can quickly explain how I went about my SOPs. So what I did was that, I wrote, Doug spoke about creative destruction, but that's what I did. I wrote everything, like every experience of my life from my college till, when I was applying, on a piece of paper. And then I just jotted down everything, whatever projects I did in Satwa, what my field experiences were, what my experiences with my clients were, what were my learnings from my coursework in college, from my YF experience, from Satwa, etc., from all my internships. I wrote down everything on like a piece of paper, and then I had a look at the schools that I wanted to apply to, and then I mapped with what was required to my experiences. And I saw a question on the chat with respect to how do you tailor your SOPs, because every school requires a different SOP. You can't like regenerate the same SOP for every school. It depends from school to school, from geographic location, from what they require, etc. Because if you go to the site of every university, they will have 2 or 3 things that that are literally highlighted, or that come out that, oh, this is what matters to us, which might be different for every school. And that's how you tailor your SOP. You literally show what they, I mean, you map your life experiences to what the school, to what matters to the school the most. And that's what I did. So I had like 15 experiences in front of me, and then I started writing my SOP. So I wrote like a generic sort of SOP of my experiences, and then you weave that together right from your college to your experiences. And you can't put everything in like 1500 words, right? You have to like filter out, but you need to then decide what's most important to you once you have everything in front of you. So that's what I did. And then I made small changes to like each SOP for every school with respect to what mattered to them the most. So I tried to, through my SOPs, I tried to highlight those values that matter to the school through my experiences. And I think that really helped a lot. And I did the same with my resumes as well. I wrote down everything that I'd ever done in my life, and I made like a long resume, like a 5-page or CV versus like a 2-page CV, which again differs from school to school. So I think once you have everything in front, that's the first step you should do. Even before writing an SOP, you should have everything in front of you so that you can then filter out and then see, what you want to include where. And, there's this thing called the writer's block, which happens to everybody once you start writing SOPs, because, there were days when it took me like 1 hour to write like 2 sentences, because I used to really like think through them. And once that flow started coming in, then, I started like being more sort of just that flow started coming in, then I just started being more smooth with my SOPs. So that's that. I think that's how you should write your SOPs. And quickly on the other question on LORs, you should reach out to people you want your LORs from as soon as possible. Probably September is the time. If you're applying in December, January, if you want to apply for next year fall, that is. Every school, especially in the US, mostly requires, 2 for sure, but some schools also ask for 3 LORs, and you should have that diversity. So what I did was I asked my clients, I asked my managers, I asked professors from BIF, and you should see who to ask for which school. So I applied to 7 schools in the US, and nobody's going to give you 7 LORs, because like nobody's that free. People are busy. So what I did is I had like backups for everybody. So I had like 3 and 3, like 3 main recommenders, and then 3 backup recommenders. And then I had my schools divided into like list A and list B, like priority A and priority B. And then I asked the people, who were the more important ones for priority A schools. And then I asked the people who were I won't call them like less important ones, but like the other ones for like priority B schools. And those were like similar kinds of people. So say, for example, if one category was, say, somebody from my office, I asked the CEO for like important schools. And then I asked my manager, who was a principal, for like my list B schools. And both of them were equally senior in their positions, and I'd worked with them equally. I'd worked in the same capacity with them, but just that thing of, oh, this person holds a high designation, so I can probably leverage this for like my list A school versus my list B school. So for LORs, I'd reached out to them as soon as possible. As soon as I decided, okay, these are the schools I want to apply to, and these are the schools I'm going to reach out to them for, I created like 2 lists of recommenders also. So 3 recommenders for list A who applied to like some 3 schools, and then 3 recommenders for like list B who would apply to like the rest of the 3 or 4 schools. That's how I went about doing my LORs. Again, last thing I'd like to say is just tie your LORs to your SOP. They should be complementary. They should not be a recommender saying something else, SOP saying something else. And the other thing is, like I said, you can't really put in everything in your SOP. So try to put in things in your LOR which is not in the SOP. So if you really want to highlight an experience of a certain project that you can't put in your SOP, do that in your LOR. If you worked with a manager on like a certain project which really had an impact, and you had certain learnings, and you really performed well in that, let the manager tell that in the LOR. So together, the SOP, LOR, and the resume should be like super holistic and like tell a story rather than being completely separate, and they should all be very complementary to each other.
Thank you for the detailed answer, Ashna. Anything else that anyone else wants to add, or else we can move on to the next question.
I would only add that one, I think Ashoka provides a lot of workshops. During my time, there were a lot of workshops on SOPs, and I would highly recommend attending those. I remember, I think the structure I followed was from Aniha, and like she did a great session, and I think I've always followed that one. And I think uh, having different people do different iterations and reviewing your SOP, I think that is a very, very big component, because you know what kind of story you're presenting when you're making other people read it, and don't get discouraged if people are like, hey, this is trash or this is not good. Like, I think that's a great, like, instead of the colleges reading, it's your friends or it's mentors or it's professors reading that SOP. So I think working on a lot of iterations is a big tip that I would give.
Just a follow-up on the same, and this is more related to the LORs on the same lines as related to SOPs. So, how much does stature is valued in your LORs? In the sense, like, while you were applying, what did you value more? Stature of the person who's writing your LORs, or the quality of the LORs that the person wrote?
So my understanding is by quality, you mean how personalized the LOR can be? Is that what you mean?
Yes, in terms of quality, yes. How personalized the person can write the
Yeah,
LOR.
I think it's, I mean, I would personally go for somebody who, uh, say you have a CEO of a company and you have your own manager, but you have worked closely with the manager over 10 months on a project, then I would rather have the manager write my LOR than the CEO who might want who might give a very generic overview. Uh, but that's a personal choice because I believe that has holds more value. Kohima?
Yeah, no, I think I agree with Ritvika. And see, the stature might be important for you because you've worked with that person, so you see that as an important thing. But someone who's not, again, coming back to the same point that I was trying to make before, that someone who's not aware of the Indian, or say your hierarchy, for them, stature would really come at the second thing, or it might be even beyond that. Quality would definitely be the first thing, the way they talk about you and your work. And if there's something that can come after that, I would still put that and still keep the person's position designation later. But yeah, quality is definitely always the first thing.
One more thing I think somebody told me was that if you're applying, always make your application be read by somebody who doesn't know you personally, because that's also the person who would be reading your application in the admission committee. So your SOP, while you may think that you've covered everything and you understand it perfectly, your friends may think it's perfect. But if I, as a third person, cannot see what you're trying to say, then it doesn't make sense.
On the LORs, I think I agree with everybody that, like the quality and like the quality of relationship you shared is very, very important. This is just another perspective that I would like to add, is that, say, for example, I know professors like A.K. Shiv Kumar, like, who are very well known in international circles, or say, again, this is very specific to YF, I'm not sure with the UGs, but if it's like Dwight giving you a LOR, I think those professors can matter, and people who are well known in the system, I think then I think stature can be important, because the universities you're applying, if you're applying to, say, for example, Harvard, and people do know A.K. Shiv Kumar there, then I think it is a good signaling value that you're bringing with you.
Yes, Kohima.
Sorry, yeah, just a quick addition to it. I think this is something that I've experienced that has happened with me before, and I think it has happened with some of my friends. Always ask for people whom you can follow up easily. If you end up reaching out to some people to write your LORs, and then eventually you're not able to, they might be very senior or they might be very busy with their work, and you end up not easily following up with them, I think it doesn't really add value to it then. Instead, ask people who can easily reach out, follow up, check on them if they've written. And I think it has happened with me, and I'm not sure if that's common practice. If someone very close, like your manager or someone you've worked with before is writing it for you, they also end up sometimes telling you to draft it for you, draft it for them, sorry. So I think if that is the kind of relationship that you have with someone, go for them. I think that's the best case then.
Thank you, Kohima. And keeping time in mind, we'll move on to the next question. So next question is somewhat related to this aspect, and it's a general question, which is about the importance of Ashokan alumni in your target schools, and versus like reaching out to Ashokan alumni in your target schools versus hiring an admissions consultant to help you with the applications, or attending college information sessions for your target schools. What do you think should applicants prefer more, or what will add more value to their application?
So, have these options.
Shefali, can you be a little louder, please? Thoda sa.
Okay, I think do it all, man. If you have the option of, if you have the access to all these things, then why not do it all? And but having said that, the only out of the way thing is the admissions consultants, right? And that's also often very cost heavy. I think once you can draft your own application, you make it go through a lot of people, Ashoka alumni, or otherwise people who are doing things that you want to do more important, I think. So if an Ashoka alumni is doing a program in the same university, but it's not necessarily the same program, I think it would be a better idea to ask them to ask somebody in that program itself and ask them to review your application. And yeah, also spend time in like seeing things online. I think throughout the seminar, we've been focusing on the websites of these programs. They're literally your only guidebook that you need to do everything that you need to do. And that's what I did. But yeah, I'm guessing it might be different from different schools.
Daksh, and we'll move on to the next aspect with Deshna, keeping time in mind.
Yeah, just two very quick points. First, Ashokans are everywhere. I did not realize the power of Ashoka's alumni, YFs plus UGs plus everyone. It's insane the amount of people that are there from Ashoka in all institutions across the world. Use this. I mean, very few get this opportunity to use these kinds of networks to prod their applications along. So I have never found, I have reached out to a lot of people over my time, YF or UG or whoever they are. Not one of them have said no ever. There might be some problems in scheduling, something like that, but nobody will reject you outright saying that we will not help you do this, we will not help you do that. So I think using the power of alumni is one thing that you can do and you should definitely do. And that brings me to my second point is about admission consultants. I have nothing against them, but once you start seeing what they're like, this is one person who's writing an application for many people, right? You are not the only customer for that particular consultant, and he or she does not have your entire background 25 26 years in mind when they're doing the writing for you. So more often than not, when you come across these SOPs, these CVs, you can immediately know whether the student themselves have written it or whether it has been outsourced to some other person. This is very clear. Once you see this in practice, I have seen many numbers of CVs and SOPs that have come in, and you read the first 5 lines and you recognize that this has been written by somebody who's not the student, right? Imagine if me with 1 year of grad school experience can do this. Institutions like the ones that we belong to have been doing this for hundreds of years, right? First look they will take and they will say that this is not the person who has written it, and they'll reject your application. This is what they literally do, right? So be very careful when you speak to these people. Their guidance, of course, is invaluable in some places, but at the end, your application is your submission. It should be you who's penning down the last word, who's doing everything. They should not be in control of the process. They should only be a little bit of assistance sort of player in the entire process. So yeah.
Thank you, Daksh. Just adding a quick tip for all the attendees that if you attend the information sessions for various universities, you might get application waivers. So keep a check on that. And with that, we can move ahead with Deshna.
Yes, so the next section is about scholarships and funding options, and the financial considerations one should keep in mind while pursuing the degrees. So the first question just being how to understand the program cost, the cost of living, and available scholarships and resources that are there. So I know of, because Ritvika and Ashna have not spoken for long, and Ritvika is on a 50% scholarship. Am I audible? Yeah,
Yeah.
I am. Yeah. Ritvika is on a 50% scholarship and Ashna is on a 100% scholarship, both funded by their individual departments. So yeah, why not be here for both of them this time?
Could you repeat the question again, please?
Yeah, sure. So the question is about exploring funding options such as scholarships, loans, self-funding, etc., and also
Yeah.
understanding the program cost and the cost of living that would be involved while you choose the program.
Yeah, fair. So the university itself provides a rough estimate of, like, how much the cost of living and everything would be. It's always better to take it with a pinch of salt, because you can always, some of the costs you can always reduce them, especially when it comes to rent and food and transportation, and all those are flexible costs. You don't have to spend that much at times. And as far as it goes about exploring other funding options, there are a lot of resources available, especially even within the Ashoka community. There are a bunch of Excel sheets that keep getting circulated on scholarships that are available. And it's always a good idea to keep a track of when their deadlines are. Some of them have deadlines before the actual applications have deadlines. So that is one of the tricky bits, because there might be times when scholarship deadlines might go, might have ended by the time you get your admits and things like that. Or you can get a provisional scholarship, and then if you get an admit, then the scholarship gets applied. I mean, yeah, there are, you have to put in a bit of work to find out scholarships you're eligible for. I don't know if there's any other way to do it. Ashna, if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, so I think yes, definitely external scholarships everyone should apply to. Universities internally also give a lot of scholarships. So within every school also you will have graduate assistantships, you will have teaching assistantships and research assistantships that either your department can give to you or other schools in the department can also give to you. So it's not necessary that you work in your department as a TA or an RA to get that scholarship. You can work in other labs of the universities or other departments as well to get that. And just I just wanted to give my 2 cents on overall just how difficult or easy it is to get scholarships or funding in the US, because I had a very, very tough time deciding between all my admits in the US. I mean, between my admits from universities like Georgetown, like SEPA, Fletcher, where I got very, very generous scholarships, and UGA. And one of the main reasons why I ended up coming to UGA was because I got a 100% scholarship. And that funding was one of the main considerations for me in deciding my school. So I feel that you can 200% come to the US on full funding. It's not difficult at all to get funding in the US, and especially from your departments if you have like a good overall application. But I feel that to get like a full ride is easier in public universities, especially from personal experience, as compared to private universities, with the main reason being that public universities are directly funded by the federal government or state governments. So they have more fundings to give out to especially master's level students, in different programs. So that is that. The only cost at which you come to this is just having to put in some extra effort to get the output of jobs, of getting landing in the same jobs as students from A-list universities, which is not impossible, but definitely you'll have to work like a lot harder for that to sort of get the same output. So I feel that always, apart from external funding opportunities, always be on the lookout for internal fundings from school, because those are low-hanging fruits. So you can definitely it'll be easier for you to get hang of them. Reach out to your department as soon as you get a admit saying that, oh, are there any TA-ships or RA-ships available? And if not, then tell them to connect you with other departments, or reach out to, say, Ashoka, Alums, or YFs in those schools from other schools or departments, and ask them how to go about looking for funding opportunities. And sometimes the admissions committee also helps in that, because I did that when I got all my admits from all these other schools in the US. I reached out to the admissions committee and I tried looking out for internal fundings in other departments as well of the universities. So internal is something that you can definitely look out for, apart from, of course, just applying for external fundings as well.
Right. Bhargavi, would you want to add? And
Yeah, I would say, at least in my case, like, and I know this about Chicago and some policy schools, say on the East Coast, is that I think private universities also they just have a lot of money in general. So I would say that, at least I know about U Chicago, I can say that they give a lot of scholarship. I think one of the most important things to consider, especially once you start getting offers, is negotiate as much as you can. Like, do not shy away from negotiating. Like, they want you, they've given you an offer, they will keep you no matter what. And also they are also competing with other schools. So kind of like trade, make sure that you're negotiating as much as possible. So yeah.
right, thank you for that. Okay. So then the next question is one of choosing a brand name versus choosing a school which is giving you generous scholarship, something which Ashna already mentioned. But yeah, anyone, if you would have used in that. And just the second one being evaluating the economics of paying off loans, which is perhaps tied up with choosing a scholarship. Because it's like, if you want to stay back, what would be your salary, right? And how do you evaluate which college should you choose depending on your goals and objectives? So yeah. Anyone? Daksh, yes.
Okay, so the question on paying off loans, I think the STEM pathway does figure into this. If you are coming on a loan, first of all, it's very difficult to come here without funding. This is something that you have to realize and you have to internally struggle with all the time, is that if you don't have funding, it's going to be, at least for the next 2 to 5 years, it's going to be a very heavy burden on you just to pay off that loan. Remember, in this time, you are not saving anything. Just everything is going either towards your expenses or it's going towards repaying your loan. So that's the first level that you have to jump in order to get settled after that. So that's one. On the scholarship part, there is, other than what people have already mentioned, is the government of India and some states governments also sponsor a lot of students who want to come out. So do look this out. I know the government of India does it for women in STEM categories. There is a scholarship for that. For minorities also, there is state governments. I'm on a scholarship from the government of Rajasthan, so GOR does it. I think Assam's government also does it. So there are a lot of opportunities that you can exploit in order to come here vis-a-vis funding. So that would be, and then paying off your loan. Yeah, I mean, you just have to realize it's going to be very difficult. This is one thing that I also struggle with, is if I don't stay back in the US, how will I pay my loan? Because the difference between your earning capacity here in the US, or let's say otherwise anywhere in Europe as well, as compared to the same thing in India, is very low. If you've taken a US dollar amount loan and you are trying to pay it off in India, it's going to take you at least twice or thrice as longer to just pay off that loan. So be very cognizant of how you're going to strategize graduation and 2 or 3 years after that, when you have a loan component attached to your application process. So that's, yeah.
Thank you so much, Shefali, if you want to add.
Yeah, I just want to second everything that the others have said. I think between an option between funding and brand name, always go for funding. I do think that first, whatever you make of any degree, whether it's an undergrad or a master's, is what you can do with the platform that you're given. So it's not just the degree, it's also the internships that you do while doing the degree or the societies you're a part of, etc. And second, I do think that when you're going out into the job market after your degree, on some level, it becomes quite flatter than what we assume it would be, the job market or the opportunities that you'll be getting after a certain program. I think I would argue that there are a lot of schools that you won't have heard of in France also, that graduates get the same opportunities as people from Sciences Po. It doesn't, it's not that much of a difference as we might think there would be. So yeah, that's all.
Also, does the scholarship part differ when it comes to different geographies? Kohima, if you would like to answer that.
Yeah, yes, it does. I think so for specifically speaking for Lee Kuan Yew, so Lee Kuan Yew is relatively generous with scholarships to say. And I think the best part is, I don't know if it's the best or the worst part, but I think because it worked out for me, I would call it the best part. They either give you 100% scholarship or you're not on a scholarship. So we don't have percentages in between. And frankly speaking, I mean, whoever is listening, and if you want to reach out specifically for Lee Kuan Yew to me, please feel free to reach out. The process for applying for the scholarship is the easiest of all. You really don't have to do anything for that. It's just as you just do it as you do for the application. There's no more extra step that you have to do for the scholarship. It's completely merit based. And as I said, it's either 100 or it's 0. So yeah, I think it's I was on 100% scholarship, and I think I agree to what everyone said, that please go for funding rather than the school name. Even if you can afford it and you have everything that you can give to it, I think it's still a lot of money that is involved in a lot of these programs. And I think the other thing that I think we sometimes forget talking about is that while you're studying, I think it's also important to enjoy those years, explore those new geographies that you're going to be in. And I think you can only do that if, I personally feel, and I think you can disagree on that, but you can do it if there's no pressure on you to, pay off these loans later and after you graduate. So yeah, I think that's my personal experience.
Thank you so much. So our next section which is the second section, is about job and career prospects. So Manan, why?
Thank you, Deshna. So yes, in this section we'll talk about career prospects and the opportunities that studying abroad brings us. And we can start with the kind of networking opportunities that a degree in US, UK, Europe, or in Asia that provides, and how it differs from a policy degree in India.
I can take the question. Sorry, was anybody saying anything?
No, I was just motivating someone to raise their hand.
Okay. Yeah, I think I can speak both from a perspective of me not having work experience, and now I've been in the job market for like almost 3 years. So I think I've mentioned some things that, of course, as an international student, yes, you will, especially in the US, you will be at a disadvantage by not having a visa. But of course, all these other things like having 1 year of work visa and then STEM will add to your credentials. I think the main point was about networking, right? I think at least in the US, networking is a big thing. Like everything happens on networking. There's no you could have a 4-point GPA, you could have a 340 on 340 GRE score, whatever GMAT score, but nothing matters. Everything is about networking. So right from the time that you are applying to the to even when you get the offer, start networking with people, and also I think be open to different avenues. And also, at least as I saw in U Chicago, and I know about some other universities, is that there are ample opportunities to network within your schools, but also outside your schools. I did see a question about whether can you go into corporate jobs after MPP or an MPA. That is a possibility. It all depends on you. So say, for example, at U Chicago, make sure that you're going into the business school as well, talking to people there, talking to people in the data science field, talking to people in social sciences field. So it's all upon you how you structure your networking skills. And yes, and it shouldn't be like, hey, this is who I am and this is who you are, but a lot of follow-ups and making sure that you're kind of developing those relationships over time. Two other things, I think, leverage your LinkedIn as much as you can. And again, Ashoka network will be very, very helpful. And third, this is something which is very new for me, but Twitter, especially for academic circles, this is something it's not very obvious, but Twitter is very, very important also.
Anything else to add, or can we move on to the next question? Oh, yes, Daksh, go ahead.
Okay, just hammering on 2 points. One is networking. I think it's Bhargavi was right in saying that it's a very big part in the US, but I have come to increasingly believe that it's a big part in India as well. It matters who you know rather than what you know at this point. Your merit flows right out of the building when somebody else who knows someone gets the job. So be very, I would say, in terms of networking, be very strategic about it. You have to know who you have to approach. If you just start talking to anyone and everyone, you'll exhaust all your energy all the time, every day, right? You have to be very strategic in who you are approaching, why you are approaching them, what is it that you need out of them. This needs to be clear in the first 5 minutes. If you're networking with someone, so building relationships is one thing and networking is one thing. Networking is like speed dating, right? You just go in, get information and get out. If you get stuck there, it's going to be your loss and you're wasting others' time as well. So that's my 2 cents on networking. On career opportunities, the model in foreign countries that I've noticed is different from how we do it in MBAs in India. It's like all the companies come to campus and they hire everyone, almost everybody across the spectrum. Here, it's you work with the career development team in charting your own path. No company is coming to hire you. You have to proactively reach out to them. You can use your networks. You can use the alumni for Ashoka or for whatever institution you're going, and then figure out what you want to do. So it's not like somebody will come you spoon feed you the job and then go back. It won't happen like this more often than not. And on the question of can you go to corporate job, I think you can go anywhere. MPP and MPAs or any other degree for that matter are just broad frameworks that allow you to think about the world in a certain way. It is up to you to apply those frameworks to your real life. You can do it in a corporate job, not for profit, government, private sector, anywhere, right? As long as you have the capacity to implement what you've learned in the field and you can convince your employer of that. So 2 things on networking and career opportunities.
Thank you, Daksh. The next question is related to the types of jobs that you can get after pursuing an MPP or an MP or an aligned degree. And along with that, the importance that work experience carries when you sit for placements or for internship cycles. Because as soon as you join college, you're sitting for, if it's a 1 year program, your placements, and if it's a 2 year program, your internships or RShips. So how do you navigate through that aspect?
Sorry, I'm not completely clear on what the question is. If you could please rephrase it or say
Sure,
it
sure.
again.
The question is on the types of jobs available and how your work experience makes you eligible for some jobs and restricts you from applying to different jobs, and how to navigate that when as soon as you enter the college, you start applying for different internships or placement opportunities.
Kohima, go
Kohima,
ahead.
you can go.
Sure, Shivali, you can add if there's something that you would want to. So I think in terms of the kind of job opportunities after you graduate, I just recently graduated in 2023. So I can say from my experience. So I think it's very diverse. Depends on one, if you have had work-ex before, and the kind of work-ex if you have had before, that is one trajectory that you could follow. If you're working in certain sector and then you did a master's in MPP or MPA or MIA, so that is the career you could choose to follow the same career trajectory, but at a higher or a senior level at a better organization or something like that. If you had no work-ex before and then you did a master's, I think it's an open field in that case, depending on the kind of work you would want to do then. Also, I think it is also heavily dependent on the kind of courses you got exposed to during your master's. So that is also one thing that you could use to your advantage, I would say. And I think that is something that we should all, talk about. A lot of my batchmates who came from a very different work culture and work experience, different kind of sectors. But then because climate sector, I'm just taking an example from my very recent case. But because climate is something that we're all talking about and it's there everywhere, and they wanted to pivot into that sector, they very intentionally took courses to study about the climate sector, about the climate policy, about what is happening globally. And I think that gave them an opportunity to explore opportunities in that sector, and they were able to make through it. So I think the kind of courses that we choose, and I think one of us mentioned in the previous questions that, there are core courses and there are electives. So electives is something that you could choose. Core is something that I'm sure that I think almost all the colleges have a similar pattern. There are certain courses that you have to study as a part of that college and as a part of that course, but then you have the liberty to choose certain kind of courses. So based on your experience or based on your interest, you can choose certain courses if you're really passionate about following a certain career trajectory, and that gives you a leverage to do that. Yeah.
I can add a few things. Sorry, I've been speaking a lot. One, especially if you are looking at corporate jobs, but also not corporate, but say economic consulting or something like that, make sure that you're somewhere in, like, a lot of these organizations will hire you as full-time employees based on whether or not you did an internship with them. And so it almost works similar to a college application cycle. So for your summer, say summer of 2024, these organizations will start hiring right now. So as soon as you get into college, that's when your internship process will start. So being mindful of that, also looking at a lot of universities will have research labs and different units. So I think that's another place where you could start off by looking at things.
Thank you, Bhargavi. Thank you, Kohima. So one last question, which was in the comments as well, which was related to what kind of internships or opportunities that I should look at before applying that can help later in building a better network and then getting better jobs as well. Yes, Kohima, go ahead.
I'll just quickly add and then someone can jump in. So I think, see, there are two things that you can do. One, if you're very sure that this is the kind of sector, this is the kind of, broadly, this is the kind of JD that I want to work in, please do internships, apply for internships specifically in that sector. It really adds value. On the other hand, if you're really not sure, and which is completely okay, if you're still exploring, you're not sure about the sector, you're not sure about the kind of geographies you would want to work in, I would say please explore. Do the elimination thing. Pick up things that you're interested, that seem interesting to you, but then you're not sure if that might be your long-term interest going forward after 5 years, going in 10 years into that. Then pick up an internship in that and see if that really is still working out. If it is not, eliminate it. That is the other way you can try. But I think if you're very sure, go into it. Just focus on that sector. Try focusing on internships, different kind of courses in that same thing. Yeah.
Thank you, Kohima. Now we can move on to the last aspect of the discussion. Vishnu, would you like to take it?
Yeah, so the last aspect would be the application process. No questions as such, just you guys sharing your experience on, how was it? What were the timelines that you kept in mind? How did you feel throughout the process? You took help from people, and how was the sweet result, if I may say so? So yeah, anyone who would want to answer.
I can go ahead. Okay, Daksh, do you want to go ahead? Okay. I can quickly just speak about my personal experience of applications. So I started thinking about applications sometime during the month of May, June. And I got everything in place. There are a lot of parts to the application, and the process can be very overwhelming at first, but I was just being very systematic sort of helped me just sail through it and be very calm about it. So the first thing that I got rid of was my GRE, my TOEFL. All the standardized tests were done, and then I started my SOPs, my LORs, building up my resume. Spoke to a lot of people from Ashoka, from all the universities that I applied to. They really helped. One thing that I personally also did is I pestered my admissions, like the admissions committee, those admissions email IDs that you have on every website. I emailed them a lot with every small doubt or every small question that I had, because I wanted to be super sure with respect to my transcripts, with respect to my standardized tests, etc., etc. So what I would want to say is that one small advice that I'd want to give is that do not be scared to email them, because they're there for you. That's their job. And that really helped me a lot. With every small query that I had, I just emailed those admission email IDs that were there on like every website. And then I think what took the major chunk of my time during my entire application process was my SOP. So I really put in like a lot of time and effort into my SOPs, and the LORs, the resume, just like they were everything that was happening on the side. Which is not to say that you should not really focus on them, but SOP is the major chunk, is you always take a lot of time to like draft your SOPs. And I think there was some 10 or 15 iterations that I had to do over and over again. And even after applying to say some schools in December, for the ones that I applied in January, there was still a lot of iterations, because it's every process, with every round, you learn something new and you're just like, okay, let me change this and make it better. So that was that. And coming to the next phase of the application process, which is when you get the admits. Of course, that feeling is like really good. But I would say that just again, one piece of advice, for that phase would be to really think through your priorities, because it's very subjective. Different things matter to different people. Like I said, for me, apart from everything else, funding was a major consideration, because I wanted to come to the US and study for free, if that makes sense. So, I thought through things like, okay, will not having a brand name and foregoing a brand name give me the same output as what I would get with the brand name? Whatever the answer is, will that give me obstacles during the way in getting jobs? Yes, of course, that'll be more difficult, stuff like that. But will that give me like peace of mind? Yes, of course, that was also the answer. Your experience just of going anywhere for your masters might differ a lot when you answer these questions. So I would say just talking to a lot of people who've been through this process, and just getting your own priorities set is one thing that you should definitely do once you get all your admits, because that's what's going to decide your course going forward and your entire 2-year experience of your master's program. The only thing you should not say later on is that, oh, I wish I'd done that, or oh, I wish I'd not done this. You'll never regret your decision, which is why you should really, whatever decision you end up making, just think through everything and list all your priorities and see what is more important to you and what is not. That's all that I'd say. But Having said all of that, I feel that Ashokans are super helpful. I took a lot of help from a lot of people, so feel free to reach out to anybody. Nobody's going to say no, like everyone else mentioned. And just, I would say, be super organized. I used to maintain an Excel sheet with the deadlines for every school, with what every school required, etc., and where I was. So I think that really helped me be very organized. So I think you'll just sail through the process, and it's just about getting started. For the longest time I was procrastinating, and I was like, oh my god, it's such a huge process. But I think once you get started and you're in the process, it's just a lot of it's a lot of self-reflection. It's a lot of fun. You get to learn a lot of things about yourself as well. So I think that process in itself, 1 year before coming to the US or wherever, in general, wherever you go, Europe, US, Singapore, I think that 1 year in itself is a journey. So I think just enjoy and go along, like go with the flow. So I think it'll be fine.
Right. Thank you so much, Ashna, for such a detailed answer. Daksh?
Yeah, two quick points. One is completely second everything that Ashna has said. My timeline is pretty similar. It's you start thinking of it as soon as possible, at least subconsciously. You keep this thing in mind that you have to go there, you have to go there. It will build some confidence in you. But for me, the active part of it came in like 8 months before the deadline. 4 months for preparing for GRE and everything. It's because you're working, you're studying, or you're doing other things. So GRE is your second priority at that time. So give yourself some time to prepare for that exam. It's about time management more than what you know. Also, I'm surprised nobody has mentioned this. Ashoka does offer TOEFL waivers. By the way, if you guys are looking, if you have an English speaking institution, English teaching institution as your history, you can apply for TOEFL waivers a lot of the time. So that will save you a lot of time and money on that end. And then for SOPs and all, it at least has to go through 10 or 15 iterations, as Ashna was saying. I mean, you just have to start destroying yourself to build yourselves up again. So that's the broad timeline. I would say that then the second part is getting accepted or rejected. That's a whole different roller coaster. You get accepted, you're happy, you get rejected. You're extremely sad that you put in that much amount of work into preparing that application, and then the school rejected you without telling you why they rejected you. So don't be disheartened by that. Statistically, on average, you'll get in 50% of the time, not 50% of the time. That's just part of life. The third part that nobody told me when I was applying was after getting the admit and attending the school. That's a very big part of the application process. I mean, once you get the admit, and then you have to do everything. You have to plan your 2 years. Where will you stay? What will you do? How will you eat? What will you drink? How will you get your visa right? How will you get your finances right? How will you do transportation? It's a very big chunk, right? It's logistical in nature, but it's so heavy on your mind that you will start forgetting things. So be prepared for that. Once you got the admit, that's half the fight. Actually going to the college is the next 50%. So save some energy up for that, and throughout the process, enjoy yourselves. I mean, this is a process it's of course about competition, but it's about reflection. And once you get that admit, be very proud of the fact that you have gotten into places where very few people get in. It's a reflection of your life, right? This is more signaling value than anything else. A lot of these admission processes are signaling values to your employers, to your friends, to your colleagues, everybody. So enjoy the process while you're at it. I mean, why be in despair? Be happy when you're doing it.
Thank you so much, Daksh. Anyone else who would like to say? It's the last chance, guys, and then we are. Yeah, Shafali, please.
There's something that Gapsha said about having to after getting the admit, having to figure out everything of how things will happen. I think that reminds me that even if your deadline is, let's say, around Jan, but the application's open in October, try to apply in October, because the accommodation runs out very, very, very quickly. And and by accommodation, I mean one that is affordable and near, etc. So all of these things that you need to consider are actually very important, and he's very right to bring it up. And so that's you should plan your year that way as well, I think. Yeah, that's it.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on. So it's always a good idea to divide all the schools you're applying to into your dream reach backup, like, and if there are a lot of deadlines which are overlapping and one is getting overwhelmed, it's also a good idea to maybe apply to some in the first round, which are all your dream schools, and then your backup schools might not be the worst to apply in the second round. I mean, not the best advice, but if there are a lot of schools, then you can place it out. You can kind of, because you have some deadlines in December, some in February. So yeah.
Thank you so much. Anything else if anyone wants to say? Otherwise, we're done with the session. Okay, so thank you so much all for joining in. It has been immensely helpful to have so many people from so many different schools to have us here. I am sharing a Zoom link with everyone. If anyone wants to join just for a 15 minutes Q&A, because we have already had a long session. Daksh and Bhargavi had agreed to stay back. This would be a one-on-one question answer thingy. So if anyone wants to stay back, please do. I'm sorry, just anyone wants to join this link, please do. And yeah, again, thank you so much. It was immensely helpful. I'll be circulating an Excel sheet or a Google form to sort of collate resources which we could sort of help the participants. So I think that would be helpful for them, because there were a couple of questions being asked, and there are a couple of other questions being mailed to us, which I'll forward to you guys, being to specific panelists as well. So yeah, but thank you so much for joining in. If anyone of you have any closing remarks, please tell us. Otherwise, I'll meet you at the other meeting.
I mean, just the final thought is, do reach out to people. More often than not, you'll find that they'll be helpful. I can say this for me is reach out. I mean, if I don't know what you want, I can't give it to you. I'm more than happy to help. I think everyone on this panel is, and more broadly, don't assume the worst in humans, as we often do. You'll get a lot of help. I really thought that I could give this help, because I didn't get any when I was applying. So this was just me all along, and it really took a toll. Hopefully that doesn't happen to anybody else. So do reach out. That's the main catch.
So guys, please join the link. Manan would be here. If anyone has any issues, I'll be meeting you on the other side. And if anyone is not able to join in from among the panelists, it's completely all right. And thank you so much for spending 2 hours of your time, especially with the glitch. And we both were very happy to have you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Manan and
Thank
Deepika.
you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.